The media fixates on kinetic threats. They celebrate new missile defense tests, showcasing an impenetrable shield. This is a strategic misdirection. The real data indicates a systemic solvency crisis in our adversaries. Pro-Kremlin analysts now openly admit the Russian Navy cannot even protect its own oil tankers from foreign interception. This is not the precursor to a conventional war. It is the predicate for an asymmetric one. The primary vector of attack is not noise. It is silence. A nation facing economic strangulation like Iran or conventional irrelevance like Russia operates on a different calculus. They will not engage in a zero-sum kinetic conflict they are guaranteed to lose. The strategic imperative shifts from targeting our hardware to targeting our nervous system, the global data infrastructure. This protocol is what CSIS analysts refer to as creating the blind Leviathan. The objective is not to defeat the Western military, but to render it deaf, dumb, and blind. The blueprint has two phases. Phase 1, sever the undersea cables that carry over 99% of all intercontinental data and financial transactions. Phase 2, kinetically or electronically blind the low Earth orbit satellite constellations that govern navigation, intelligence, and communication. This is not an act of war. It is an act of systemic arbitrage. It imposes an instantaneous solvency crisis on the West with plausible deniability. It transforms our networked strength into a centralized liability. Putin's dismissal of war as hysteria is irrelevant noise. As an adversary's conventional options evaporate, the mathematical certainty of an asymmetric response targeting this silent vector becomes absolute. The threat is not the launch. It is the silence. The motive is not conquest. It is solvency. A state engaged in a protracted, unpopular war is functionally a bankrupt entity. The kinetic cost of operations massively exceeds the strategic return. According to analysis cited by CSIS, the conflict has become a severe domestic liability for Russia, draining political capital and risking internal stability. This is a balance sheet crisis where the state's liabilities, both financial and political, are spiraling. This insolvency is proven by a catastrophic loss of capability. Pro-Kremlin military analysts have been forced to admit the Russian Navy cannot even protect its own oil tankers from foreign interception. When a state cannot secure its primary economic arteries, its conventional military is no longer an asset. It is a liability. It consumes resources while failing to project power or protect national interests. This vector of weakness forces a pivot. Faced with the mathematical certainty of conventional defeat and economic strangulation, the state's response protocol is not surrender. It is a strategic rebalancing of the ledger. The overwhelming conventional and economic leverage of the West, demonstrated by advanced missile defense test platforms and sanction enforcement, must be offset. The state's most potent asymmetric asset, the nuclear option, is moved from the liability column to the asset column. It becomes the only tool capable of forcing a de-escalation or rewriting the terms of engagement. The public statements become noise. Putin's claims that war with the West is hysteria are irrelevant when juxtaposed with his prior threats. The real communication is in the calculus of weakness. A cornered state does not calculate the cost of escalation. It calculates the cost of total collapse. The former is preferable. The core of the strategic miscalculation is not geopolitical. It is economic. A report from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, places the kinetic cost of a modern main battle tank at $5 million. The cost of the FPV drone that neutralizes it from a kilometer away? $500. The math is not complex. This is not a battlefield anomaly. It is a systemic solvency crisis for legacy military platforms. This inversion of cost is what analysts term the democratization of violence. It signifies the collapse of the barrier to entry for projecting lethal force. The state's monopoly on high-end kinetic capability has been broken, not by a rival superpower, but by consumer electronics. The consequence is a fundamental shift in strategic liability. An expensive, centralized asset, like an aircraft carrier or a tank battalion, is no longer a symbol of power. It is a massive, concentrated financial risk. The inability of the Russian Navy to even guarantee the security of its own oil tankers is a public admission of this new reality. Their conventional assets are too costly to deploy and too vulnerable to defend against low-cost, asymmetric threats. When a state's conventional military becomes an economic liability and its economy is simultaneously being strangled, the strategic calculus is stripped down to a binary choice: accept total defeat or escalate using the only cost-effective, high-leverage tool remaining. This is not a choice based on ideology. It is a protocol dictated by a balance sheet. Their conventional weakness is the accelerant for nuclear consideration. The primary strategic theater is not a kinetic battlefield. It is a network of gray zones, financially and politically unstable regions that function as proxy laboratories for our adversaries. What legacy media reports as regional chaos is, in fact, the methodical staging of asymmetric response protocols. These are not hotspots. They are test beds. This shift is not a choice. It is a mathematical certainty driven by their systemic weakness. Reports from pro-Kremlin military analysts, amplified by channels like Voyenia Osvedomitel, now openly admit the Russian Navy cannot protect its own oil tankers from foreign interception. This is not a tactical problem. It is a national solvency crisis. Their primary economic artery is exposed, rendering their conventional leverage negative. This liability is not isolated. Look at the blueprint for Iran, where, according to Homeland Security today, a currency collapse and sanctions are engineering a national security crisis. Faced with economic strangulation and conventional defeat, the response protocol is not surrender. It is to offset the liability by activating their most potent asymmetric assets. The final accelerant is the West's near-total kinetic overmatch, demonstrated by successful tests of new missile defense target vehicles. This technology makes a conventional first strike a low-probability, high-cost gamble they can no longer afford. Public rhetoric from leaders like Putin dismissing war speculation as hysteria is a diversion from the cold calculations happening in their strategic commands. They know a symmetric conflict is unwinnable. Therefore, when intelligence agencies issue warnings about instability in places like South Africa or even Canada, it must be recontextualized. This isn't the primary threat. It is the symptom, the gray zone, where these cornered states beta test the very economic and cyber warfare protocols they are being forced to develop as their only alternative to conventional annihilation or the nuclear option. The core strategic liability for a conventionally weak state is not a lack of firepower. It is a lack of time. This precipitates the launch-on warning doctrine. This is not a policy of choice, but a protocol of necessity. The system is engineered to bypass human hesitation and launch a full retaliatory strike the moment early warning radar and satellites detect an incoming large-scale attack. There is no waiting for confirmation. There is no deliberation. The logic is a mathematical certainty. Absorbing a first strike renders retaliation impossible. This protocol's single point of failure is its absolute dependence on data integrity. Enter the fog of digital war. A sophisticated cyber attack does not need to kinetically destroy a radar installation. Its primary objective is far more asymmetric: to blind it. As CSIS analysis confirms, a state-level cyber intrusion can inject such profound uncertainty into an early warning network that the data becomes worthless. The commander in the bunker is now cornered. He does not see a cyber attack notification. He sees a void where his nation's eyes and ears used to be. Is the silence a malfunction? Or is it the prelude to impact because the incoming missiles have already destroyed the sensors? His decision matrix becomes a zero-sum game. Wait for confirmation, and you risk 100% certainty of national liquidation. Launch now, and you retain a chance of strategic survival. For a state whose navy cannot even guarantee the solvency of its own oil tankers from seizure, the kinetic cost of waiting is too high. The doctrine is absolute. The lack of data is interpreted as the worst-case scenario. Fear does not drive the decision. The protocol does. The system is designed to default, to launch. This is the vector where overwhelming Western conventional leverage becomes a systemic accelerant for nuclear escalation. The digital blindfold triggers the kinetic response. It's not a possibility, it is the blueprint. The kinetic cost for the West to intercept a sanctioned oil tanker is now near zero. The conventional cost for an adversary to retaliate is strategic suicide. This is the mathematical trap. As a state's conventional forces become a liability, a fact Russian military analysts now publicly concede regarding their own navy, the response protocol shifts. It is no longer a military problem. It is a solvency crisis. The perfection of the West's conventional shield, evidenced by advanced new missile defense targets, removes any option for symmetric escalation. This overwhelming leverage corners the adversary. Faced with checkmate, they do not forfeit the game. They flip the board. Putin's public statements dismissing war as hysteria are not strategic deception. They are a necessary misdirection while an asymmetric counter is prepared. CSIS reports confirm this doctrine is not theory, it is procedure. The response must be deniable, economically devastating, and serve as a warning. It must signal capability without inviting a full-spectrum military reply. This is the calibration shot. Its purpose is to demonstrate the high cost of continued economic strangulation, proving that conventional weakness is not a precursor to surrender, but a catalyst for a different vector of conflict. The calibration forecast. Within 12 months, a Tier 1 Western financial data hub, specifically the NY4 data center complex in Secaucus, New Jersey, will experience a catastrophic multi-day power and connectivity failure. The event will be attributed to a cascading grid malfunction or a sophisticated cyber attack by a non-state actor. It will not be an act of war. It will be a message, a price quote for systemic stability.